We'll be continuing this year when you move.
It's 2 years. 2 years, Wayne. Let's wait and see. I hope so. I'll tell you what. We'll have a chavrusa, okay?
Okay. Deal.
All right. We'll see what we'll
Whip
see.
me into shape.
Okay. Oh, we don't want you to see that. Okay. There we go. I just
Nice
got
that you pay taxes, so
I do.
like the rating.
Okay. We are where do these associations come from? Okay. All right.
I used to love everyone here.
Okay. So what we were studying yesterday is under what circumstances are you allowed to take something without the owner's knowledge? And what we learned yesterday is that there are certain instances where if let's say the owner says, back in 10 minutes, or and you want to just take an item and run and you want to pay him later. Or let's say we had the makolet example, right? Was what we were talking about. V'yesh omrim kishebarur shahadavar shu notel omed lihimacher. The item that you want to take is going to be sold. I mean, it's going to be put up for sale. In mishalim damim keneged hadavar shelakcho. So as long as you pay cash for the thing that you're taking, you'll pay him later. Ein tzorech lizkot et hamamon levalam al yedei acher. You don't even have to give the money to somebody else to say, here, acquire this on behalf of the store owner. So let's say you come to the makolet and you want to buy bread or dairy products or eggs or whatever. And the owner of the store hasn't shown up yet. And it's the store opens, let's say, at 7. And you're on your way to Shacharis, or you're on your way back from Shacharis. You got to run to work. You want to pick up a fresh loaf of bread for the house. And you see it's waiting there outside. V'sifkei halechem v'hachalav henichu liyad hachanut otam motzrim shehizmin. And so the dairy products and the bread products are right there outside the store. Okay, kevan sha'otam hamotzrim yesh lahem mechir kavua. He says, you know that those products have a fixed price. You know what the guy charges. V'hamaot be'en nitein lakachat u'lashan levalachanut achar kach. You have the money in your pocket, and everything's ready to pay. Just there's no one to pay. So you would be allowed to take a loaf of bread and just basically say, okay, I owe the guy for a loaf of bread, as long as I have it in my pocket. It would seem, he says, that even the store owner is happy that you do that, because he doesn't want you to buy the bread somewhere else. Like, in other words, ultimately, he's going to end up profiting. He doesn't have to open up his store just for you, and but everyone's happy. Unless, let's say, you're dealing with a situation where the provisions that are left outside the guy's store have already been promised to somebody else. So then that could be a different situation, where a guy only has enough deliveries to take care of specific people that have already been designated. But that's usually not the case in the makolet example. Any examples that you can think of in Canada where that would be relevant?
Used to be that sometimes they deliver newspapers to the corner store.
Yeah, newspapers to the corner store, and they leave like a stack of newspapers. Those days are
People don't read
gone.
newspapers anymore.
Yeah, no one reads the newspaper anymore. Any other examples where you can produce stores or anything like that?
I don't think it really works that way.
Yeah, doesn't really work
What if
that.
it were Shabbos and you go in, you can't pay, you grab something, and then you come back and pay later?
Well, who's going to have stuff for sale on Shabbos? Is that
In Canada, it's open anyway.
there may be,
Usually,
Unless you make an prior arrangement.
prior arrangement, pre-pay.
well, so where's the storekeeper?
He's not there. It's our example, he's not there, you go in, you were gonna ask him, can I have this and pay you after? He's not there, so you leave with your thing.
It could be that there's an issue with Hilchos Shabbos there of, you're not
Well,
supposed
the
to,
store's open anyways.
Class.
you're not supposed to make transactions on Shabbos unless you know that the storekeeper is willing to lend it to you.
I mean, maybe something like a medicine that you need,
It could be.
like I
It
think
could
they
be.
have, that you're allowed to take. I think sometimes pharmacies have that deal where.
Yeah, some, like, it could be the
Yeah, I know
shoppers.
there's this place in the Rova that the yeshiva workers, they go to. That's run by a Bedouin or a non-Jew. And he lets people take things and come back after Shabbos.
Really?
Yeah. It's on the pathway on the way to the,
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, he's gotta pay the money that day or the next day, or is this, in this circumstance? The money's set aside in his pocket, so what he's got to give to the storekeeper the same day?
right, so that's the question is, when does he have to give it to him? He doesn't seem to say that there's like a statute of limitations.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, you would think that there should be like the same day or something like that, but
like paying
But-
a worker.
but I can think of an illustration where this could go on for a full week. Because my schedule does not coincide with the Makolit schedule. And then maybe only on Friday will I have the opportunity to see him. So it could be that you don't have to wait, you know, you don't have to do it the same day. Okay, but anyway. All right, let's continue on. Another example, Likro bi'iton sheshcheno manui alav. To read the newspaper that your friend is having delivered. Iton sha'adam manui alav u'manicham lo b'toch tevat hadoar. So you live in an apartment building and they leave the newspaper there, you know, waiting for the neighbor who subscribes to that. He's a subscriber to the newspaper and you notice the headline. BB indicted, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever. That's probably daily. That's daily in the.
That's not news.
Yeah, that's not news. Okay, BB in prison. Okay, that's all right. That's news. Okay, or okay, the war is over. The hostages have come home, and you want to read the story, and it's like it's really grabbing you. Okay, imashachen o hachaver rotza lekachto al menat likro bo beveto. Let's say you want to take the newspaper, read it over coffee in your apartment, and then put it back afterwards. So Barry, you're not happy with that, huh? Okay, asur lo lasos kain. You're not allowed to do that. Okay. Oh, you see your neighbor in the hall. Oh, sorry for that coffee stain on your newspaper. Ubifrat kisha'oto adam makpid bedavar. Yesh chashash le'isser gezela. Especially if you know your friend that bothers him, you know, he wants to be the first one. He wants to get the crisp paper that's, you know, unfolded and unrumpled. So that there's actually a serious problem of gezela. V'nira she'ima'ayin bo liyad hateva. It would seem, however, that if you look at it near the mail apparatus, in other words, you're not leaving that area. Ein iser rak yishlo li zaher shelo yikra. You have to just make sure that you don't tear it and you don't mishandle it in any way. Then you have to put it back when you're done reading it. B'chol zeb medubar bi'iton charedi uli inyan din geneva. He says, but up until now, we're just talking about a Haredi newspaper vis-a-vis the laws of stealing. Aval iton chiloni, but a secular newspaper, oy chas v'shalom, milvad hachshash gezela shebedavar. Besides the fear of, you know, of gezela, yesh iser liga v'likrobo, shekulam milayim kfira uminut rachmana litzlan. So there's a further prohibition of even touching such a newspaper and reading it, because they're full of apostasy and heresy. May the Lord save us. May the Lord protect us. Clearly, you see, I was not aware of his religious ideology. I've now just gotten a flavor of it. So he is of the opinion that that there's certain problems with reading like Yediot Achronot, or even maybe Jerusalem Post. Who knows? No, maybe that's not so bad. He says it's got to be a Haredi newspaper. I don't even think he knows about the Jerusalem Post. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next. So you live, let's say you live in a Haredi building, a completely religious building, and some people get the what are some of the names of the Haredi newspapers? I just can't think of them right offhand. But anyway, okay. Misha nichnas lachanut shemochim sham peirot o pitzuchim uchedoma. Person goes into a store. Now remember, we had this shaila in Rav Sharaga, where there's been a guy who for years has been nipping some sunflower seeds, some garinim, and he's been doing it for years, so he's sure that he's accumulated, a bill over the course of time, maybe a few, maybe 100 shekels or whatever it is, and he wants to do tshuva. So a person enters a store where they sell produce or nuts and the like, v'rotza liknot mehem, and he wants to purchase. Mutar lo litom tchila kedei ladat im ha'anavim metukim o chamutzim. He is allowed to taste a grape to see if the grapes are sweet or sour. V'chein im kavanato liknot min hapitzuchim v'rotza litom im heim turiyim. Or let's say he wants to buy some roasted nuts or garinim, and he just wants to see if they're fresh. So he'd be allowed to taste one. Okluyim hetev, or if they're well roasted. Mutra litom mikol min sherotza liknota. You're allowed to taste from any type that you want to purchase. Aval im ein kavanato liknot, but if it's not your intention to purchase, then you would not be allowed to taste. If it's just you just want a little snack, then that would be usher. If it's tasting in order to know what's the best, what the quality is, then that would be considered permissible. Shaharehu over al iser genevas das v'gam al iser gezel. He says you're being over on two different kinds of stealing in a case where you're just tasting it without the intent to purchase. Number one, you're deceiving the merchant, and number one, you're stealing. He says the only time that we assume that a merchant is allowing people to taste his wares is only for the people who are actually the purchasers, the buyers. Now, and the Aruch, he quotes the Aruch HaShulchan in the footnote, Asur lasos ha'arama b'gezela. You're not allowed to steal in a deceitful way. Kagon, shaholech eitzel hachen v'ni va'omer, shirotza lichnot perot v'tom ma'at mehem. Like you go to a storekeeper and you say, I'm interested in your grapes. May I taste them in order to see, if they're sweet. Va'osa atzmo ki'ilu einu mishtaveh imo b'mekach, and he says, it's not worth it, this quality. And then he goes to the next merchant and the next merchant, and he gets to eat lunch that way. Okay. So he says that's a gazlan, and that's not right. So he says heter ti'ima birotze liknot. So where does this heter come from? Where you're permitted to taste the wares before you buy. Katav beveni shchai, po irenu meviim nashim araviot, kelim meleim chalav chamutz kafui shenikra leben kedei limkor. The Ben Ish Chai actually talks about this here in our city. I think he was from Baghdad, if I'm not mistaken, the Ben Ish Chai, but I'm not 100% sure. He says, in our city, there are Arab women who come with containers filled with fermented milk product. And he's talking about Lebanon, which is, I guess, has an Arabic origin, okay? It's a Uvaloshan Ashkenaz yogurty. And we call it yogurt, okay? Kidei limkor. V'darkam litom tchila be'etzba miza leida im hutov. V'yachar kach konim. Okay, Arab cultures, people use their fingers. So people stick their fingers into the lebanon and lick their fingers to see if it's good, and only then do they purchase it. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Remember not to buy that.
Yeah, no double dipping, right? Yesh b'nei adam she'ein rotzen liknot umarin atzmim sherotzim liknot kidei litom mikol kli v'kli. But there are people who have no intention of buying. They pretend that they want to buy, but they dip their finger in each different woman's lebanon. Okay, v'achar kol te'ima omrim shelo ariv lahem v'holchim lahem, and then after each taste they say, I don't want this. Hareza osa iser. That's prohibited. Shagonev das abrios v'gam gezel biyado. He says you're deceiving and you're stealing. Ve'afal pisha toim dover muat mikol kli v'chulei. He says, even though you're tasting less than a shava pruta from each woman's container, mikol makom ein bal haleben moichel elo lamisha rotza liknot be'emet. He says, nonetheless, the merchant of the lebanon is not moichel for you to, is not giving permission for people to taste her lebanon unless they have intention to purchase. So he says, bir divrei abeni shchayu be'emet shedivrei abeni shchay tzrichem bir. So he says, we really have to unpack what the Ben Ish Chai is saying. The Harehu Mairi Benashim Haraviot, the Hare Ananochri Moichel Afilu Pachos Mishava Pruta, Chamavor B'Gemar B'Sanhedrin. He says, usually the Gemara says that a non-Jew is not Moichel on less than a Shava Pruta. B'tzarech Lomar De'eno Moichel Davcha Kishein Kavanato Liknot. And so you have to say that he understands that the reason why a Gentile is generally not moichel is because it's when a person doesn't have the intention to purchase. Okay, in any event.
There must be a concern of perception, like especially if it's in a Goyish environment, and or like here, for example, you go to bulk barn. And maybe they're okay with you trying it. There's a different type of nut. You're not sure how that tastes. So you try one, but you're wearing a kippah and it's a Goyish store, that's probably.
Right. So it's all going.
Yeah. Basically.
Right. So it's really all going to depend on the convention. It's, as you can see from the Ben Ish Chai's tshuva and from the Aruch HaShulchan also, it all depends on what the convention of the merchants of your place is. If the merchants don't mind if the old babushka goes to the produce section at Freshco or wherever she's going to go, and she wants to taste the grape, a lot of people come from, let's say, Eastern Europe, and that's pretty standard practice. But then they come, here to Canada, and the grocer or the produce guy is going to say, hey, we don't, no tasting of the produce, especially, it's packaged already sometimes, right? So you do get a culture clash sometimes in this situation, but it all depends on what's considered convention. I don't know. I've never tasted, I don't think I've ever tasted the grapes before I buy them, but I have seen, people doing that. Is that considered acceptable in the Western world?
Yeah,
You think it is?
If it's not a marketplace, in a store.
Yeah.
You may have seen it, but it doesn't mean it's right.
You never see it at Sue's.
What?
Sue's is at the Bud Gate.
Okay.
It's owned by Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one there would ever do that,
No.
but at Sophie's for sure they would do that.
Yeah.
And
In case of the
cultural,
berries,
that's a
like
cultural.
blueberries in packages or raspberries, I see lots of ladies or people taking one,
That's-
close
that's
the thing, and then
that's
they put it in the
packaged.
cart.
Or they can buy it, they buy it.
Yeah. They can open.
So I guess Costco is fine then, I guess.
I would do it.
That the sample there.
You can see that.
Costco would allow that?
I would Costco.
You have samples all over the place.
Yeah, but those are the
Different.
samples,
That's
not
different
taking it
samples.
from.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if being a Jew there, I have no intention, like, at the Costco market we go to, so the only guy white and people there. And there's a Jewish guy that is always there, every time something's kosher comes out, it's how, come on, there's something new here, and I taste it, he makes me taste it. And
That's
it's,
different.
so.
Yeah, I think, but I think that's
Yeah.
different. There, the merchant is asking, is encouraging you to taste. Yeah, right. Yeah, they want you to taste it. Okay, so it really all depends on the scenario, I think is the bottom line, Ron. So if you're gonna go to bulk barn, like, I don't know. Yeah, I think probably the best thing to do in that situation is, would it ask the merchant, is it okay if I taste one to make sure that it's fresh? You know,
I would still be worried about Marat Iron, because you're wearing a kippah, and most people in there are not, and they're seniors.
I don't know. I guess if you go over, if they see you going over to the lady at the checkout and saying, you know, can I taste one of these things? I'm not sure how fresh are they. Okay. All right. Next. Pesule edus machmas gezelu gneva. A person can potentially become puzzled to be a witness because of theft. Hagazlan v'haganath psulim leidus min haTorah shenemar al toshas yodcha im rasha liyosed chamas. The Torah says, do not collaborate with a wicked person to make him a witness because of his crime, because of his chamas. And he quotes the Rambam in the footnote, Ezehu Rasha, what is a wicked person? Kol sha'avar avera shechayavan alei malchus. Anyone who commits an avera for which the penalty is lashes, Zehu Rasha upasel. He's pasel for edus. Va'od yesh sham shem rishayim shehem pesulim la'edus. Afal pi shehin b'nei tashlumin ve'enan b'nei malchus. There are other people who are not liable for malchus because the Torah places their penalty as payment. But afal pi shehechzir pasel la'edus mei sheganav ogazav yu'in sham. But from the moment that he stole, even if he returns the stolen item, he is still going to be puzzled for edus. Now, is that permanent? What if the guy does tshuva? He says, so he doesn't. Maybe we'll see on the next page if there's a way for a person. Obviously, a person has the opportunity to do tshuva. No, he doesn't say. I guess there has to be an assumption. You're allowed to assume that a person has done tshuva, but if a person is a habitual ganav, you know, he's the kind of guy who will go through the neighborhood borrowing people's newspapers without permission and things like that. So then that person, no matter how frum they may be in other aspects of their lives, you shouldn't use that person as a witness for your daughter's wedding. You know. Okay. Okay, next. Liknot minashim v'yeladim. Purchasing from women and children where you're not sure if they're authorized to sell. Asr liknot minashim uketana mushar b'nei habayit el dvarim shechezkatam shehem shalahem umocher midat habe'alim. You're not allowed to purchase from women and children and other family members. Other family members. You're only allowed to purchase things that you can reliably assume that belong to them and that they are selling with the consent of the owner. Like sometimes, your wife may want to sell your golf clubs because they're taking up too much space in the garage, and so she'll put them up for sale without asking you. And this is especially true if at the time of the sale, the seller, let's say a woman or a child, says, don't tell anyone that you bought them from me. Okay, so then you know that there's something suspicious here. The isha hanoset venotenet b'chol minei asakot mechira im ze beveita ubeferhesia in lachshosh shehi osa davar keneged rotzon baila. But if a woman publicly goes ahead and engages in commercial trade, obviously you don't have to worry that she's doing something that her husband opposes. Then of course you can deal with her and purchase from her. As a matter of fact, a number of my grandfather, according to my mother, my grandfather owned a shop above the shtibel that he used to run, and or above their house, or below their house, I think the store, and then they lived above the store, and he didn't want to run the store, he wanted to learn, so he put his wife up in the front to sell, and he would sit in the back learning Gemara. And a lot of Talmidei Chachamim did that, is that they, would stay in the store, and most of the time their wives were running the store. Okay, so, all right. Next, purchasing from a sharecropper. Mutter liknot me'aris shaharei yesh lo chelek beperot ve'ha'itzim v'zehu dat maran hashulchan aruch. If a sharecropper offers produce for sale or chopped wood for sale, that's perfectly fine, even though he's not the owner, but you can assume he's the authorized seller. V'dat harama davka lachar sheyekabel et chelko azay mutter demistama shalohu mocher. But according to the Ramah, you can only purchase from the sharecropper after you know that he's taken his portion and that he's selling from his portion of the produce. But if it's during harvest period, and they don't seem to have divvied up the crops, then you can't buy from the sharecropper, because you have to worry that maybe he's not going to give the owner his fair share.
Why is that our responsibility? Well, that's a relationship between the owner and the sharecropper.
Right, but it's a good question, but that's the whole point. If you know that someone is selling goods that he's not authorized to sell, or that he's stealing in the course of selling, you're not allowed to buy from that person. It's like it's like buying from a guy who's selling stuff off the back of a truck. So that there's a good chance that these are ill-gotten. That doesn't give you, so you're not allowed to purchase from him. Nowadays you go to a Chinese mall, and they're selling DVDs. I think they don't do that anymore. Like, right? Does anyone still sell DVDs?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Can't even buy a DVD player.
You can't even get a DVD player, right? But it used to be that's what people would do,
Yeah.
is that they would, the Chinese were notorious for this, and they still are. That's why Trump put on the tariffs. That was one of his arguments. He says they steal all of our intellectual property, and and they sell it, right? And so anyway,
I
okay.
don't know if that would apply in Israel, because you always see these people on the side of the road. Like I picture this, on the way to the kid's house, there's this guy with a car, and he's selling boots, and he's got them on the hood of his car, and he's there all the time. So, when I first saw it, I thought, there has to be stolen goods, but then he's there all the time.
Well, here's the
It's
question.
like his store.
Well, let's say they're not stolen, okay?
Yeah.
But there's another issue. Is he permitted, according to the law, to be selling boots on the side of the road?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Maybe
I don't
he
know
is.
either.
Maybe worth
Probably
finding out.
not. Probably not.
Okay, we'll hold it here for today.